I'm on? Good. Sorry, just had to clean the glasses because I couldn't see you. Good morning. It is Wednesday, December 12th. It's 12/12. Hey, how about that? Right in the middle of the Christmas month. Hope you're having a good holiday season, and we're delighted to have you here on Java with Jerry, as always, coming to you from the penthouse suite of the Stadium Towers here in the Platinum Triangle in Anaheim, California. And Anaheim, California is going to be one of our stories. I'm very proud of them this week. All right. Well, we're happy that you're here. As I said, hope you're having a wonderful holiday season. For those of you that celebrated Hanukkah, I know that ended Monday night. I hope it was a happy Hanukkah and you got lots of goodies and that the big gift was a good one. So what's happening today? We're going to cover some news, national, local, and state as always. Some of these stories are just sort of tied together and they tell a theme, and I want to sort of give you something to think about over the holidays as we head into next year and post-election as you head toward the next set of elections is coming around the corner in a scant, 20 months or something. We're going to be at it again in 2020. Give you some things to think about your state and about what you do when you vote. And then we will do our special feature, How to Speak Millennial. I know I'm stuck on How to Speak Millennial. I'm just enjoying it too much. I got to get some dumb criminal stories in here once in a while and do You Can't Make This Stuff Up. I have a bunch of them. I just, I get carried away with the millennial words because they tie together with the themes. Anyway, let's talk news. Let's start national. So both of these stories are sort of Trump stories. What isn't a national Trump story these days? But they're interesting because they really show you the pitched nature now of our political life that I'm not sure, and you have heard me say this in other shows, is necessarily a healthy thing for the body politic, for us to be so pitched at each other that we can't even talk about common problems in an intelligent way. And I think each of these stories sort of points that out. So first, let's talk about stormy weather for Stephanie Clifford. That's my cute little entry to this story. As you know, Stormy Daniels' real name is Stephanie Clifford, and she and her creepy porn lawyer, Michael Avenatti, sued the president. And they sued him for defamation. Apparently, Mr. Avenatti thought that one of his tweets that called Stormy's story a total con job defamed her character. I know, even strippers have a character. And so she felt defamed by him, even though I think Stormy Daniels, as a stripper and a porn star, was probably a public figure and would have to deal with the New York Times standard in defamation. She nonetheless sued. Well, that lawsuit, as you know, in California just got thrown out by the judge, and the judge determined that not only was the lawsuit frivolous and should not have been filed, but that Stormy, to add to her storm in her life, would have to pay the president's legal fees and costs. And the attorneys for the president asked for some $389,000, not a small tab. Judge ends up ordering, and then they asked for sanctions. So they wanted, if I don't misspeak this, I think they wanted $389,000 in lawyers' fees and costs, and then they wanted like $10,000 in sanctions. The judge ended up giving her a sentence of having to pay the president $329,000, not $389,000, and she had to pay $1,000 in sanctions. So imagine if you're Stormy, you got $130,000 for not telling your story to the tabloids about having an affair with the president. At least that's what you allege from Michael Cohen, who this very morning is pleading, or getting sentenced to his plea of guilty in a number of counts. And so your net out of this was $130,000, and then you end up suing the president because your creepy porn lawyer says that's a smart thing to do, and you end up with a tab owing the president back way more than you ever got in the first place. And how has this been good for you? And now, I guess, to make ends meet, she's back to stripping in strip joints. Anyway, the reason that story is interesting is because it's juxtaposition with the fact that today Michael Cohen, who once said he would take a bullet for the president, is apparently working with the Mueller team and has, in his view, ratted out the president for these payments to people like Stormy Daniels, and he's getting sentenced this morning as we speak. That sentencing is going on in New York, in the Southern District of New York, one of the more famous circuit courts of our system, and who knows what's coming out of that. I think he's pleading to multiple counts that go beyond the notion of paying both Karen McDougal, is it Karen McDougal? I think it's either Karen or Kathy McDougal, and Stephanie Clifford. He's also pleading to some tax evasion and other things he sort of did on his own, because he's a savory character. So that story you need to juxtaposition with what happened yesterday in the Oval Office. The president invites in Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer ostensibly to discuss what they're going to do in order to avoid a shutdown of the government at the end of the year and to have a budget going into 2019. As you know, that always happens in the fall. Why we picked October, I don't know, but that's our fiscal year. And so he has them in the Oval Office and they're having discussions, and at some point the president decides to invite in cameras, and I think was wise on his part because he's making a statement, right? He's talking about wanting to be transparent about what he deals with when he negotiates with the leadership of the Democratic Party. And that's going to become important because Nancy Pelosi is about to be, I think, brought back to the position of Speaker of the House come January when the new Congress is sworn. Chuck Schumer is important because even if Nancy Pelosi wanted to get something accomplished in the Congress, she's going to need Chuck Schumer and the Democrats to help shepherd it through the Senate, and what we're really heading toward is gridlock, and so the president wants to highlight that. So you know there's been this debate over money, although that's not what was really going on in the Oval Office, where the Democrats have said, we'll give you $1.6 billion for border security, quote unquote, air quotes, and the president said, I want $5 billion for a wall. And so they're talking at each other, not to each other. Border security in the minds of the Democrats and those who talk about it as border security includes drones and beefed up, surveillance and maybe, drug sniffing dogs and those kinds of things, all of which are important and certainly on the radar for what we need to do. Excuse me, I'm stepping all over my cord, and you don't want me to do that. And so that's how they talk about it. But the president's talking about a wall. He wants a physical barrier. He wants the kind of things that the Israelis have used in their situation with the Palestinians that has been extraordinarily effective and which has been used across millennia, right? Everybody's had walls. I mean, for crying out loud, Oprah Winfrey has walls around her mansion. So he wants a physical barrier to try to stop the drug trafficking, stop the human trafficking, stop the illegal border crossings of people coming from all over the world. And in many cases, they're mixed among those who are just unfortunate and trying to find a way into a better life for their families, which you can't fault them for, are people who are rather unsavory or who are terrorists or criminals who are actually preying on those people as they make their trek up. And of course he's saying, I want a wall, I want a physical barrier. And they're saying, no, a physical barrier is either immoral in Nancy Pelosi's mind or ineffective in Chuck Schumer's mind and others' minds. And in fact, that's not true because if it's done correctly as it was in Israel, it's extraordinarily effective. It's kept the Israelis safe for a long time. So he has them in the Oval Office, and they actually get into it. I mean, they played like 13 minutes of this on television last night. I watched it. It was political theater to the max, something you don't usually see. You don't see presidents and leaders of Congress having at it in the Oval Office, which is a place really that had to have some kind of respect and decorum to it. But they're getting in each other's face, and essentially Chuck Schumer says to him, you're going to go shut down the government over this wall. We're not going to give you the $5 billion. And the president says, yeah, okay, I'll take it. I will own up to it. If we're going to talk about securing things, I will take the responsibility for shutting down the government if I don't get my $5 billion. And what's really going on there that people aren't talking about in the press, because the press doesn't want to talk about this, is the president is saying to the Democrats, look, for all kinds of reasons I think are irrational, you refuse to give me the security I need at the southern border, and in my view, you're preferring non-citizens to citizens, so you're going to hold up the government, let me shut it down, because you're going to prefer to have non-citizens' rights protected rather than citizens' rights protected. And when it's framed in that context, the American people will pull high on it every time. And so in order to frame the discussion, he brought in the cameras into the Oval Office. Now, here's somebody who is not classically politically trained, but just has an instinct for how to set up a story and how to make something in contrast apparent. So the contrast today of, on the one hand, one of his former attorneys being sentenced for doing unsavory things, and the president using instincts to talk about some of the unsavory things we do in government, how we don't solve problems, just seem to be sort of two important national stories to talk about. And I juxtaposition them for the following reason. If we stop talking as a body politic about what presidents do in their private life and who they pay off and, nonsense about Russian collusion when there's no Russian collusion in the race, and just accepted the results of races and actually worked together as parties and reached across the aisle and tried to find common solutions, you can accomplish a great deal. If you roll up your sleeves as a community and work on a problem, you can actually get it done. And my last story today is a story about how that happens and how the private sector working with government can make a difference in human lives. And I wanted to start with a national story where you've got a train wreck, right? The president's private life, splashed across tabloids, people suing him for defamation, losing their shirt over their claims, trying to be famous, him arguing in the Oval Office with leaders of Congress over whether or not we secure our own borders. All of it nonsense against what my last story will be. It's an Anaheim story, a local story about accomplishment. So bear those two things in mind, because I have uncovered what the Nationals are doing, and I will uncover for you later in my local story what's going on there. All right. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about a state story. Talk about uncovering stories. Our state is an endless source of material for Java with Jerry. I could do just 3 segments on just stuff that happens in our state government on a weekly basis. So I picked a whole bunch of these stories. I hope I can get through them all. Cece, keep me honest with my time. All right. The first is a story about an economic time bomb of debt and poverty in California, which has been brewing for a long time. Our young people ought to be suing us for stupidity. Everybody like in their 20s ought to be filing a class action suit against their parents for stupidity. Here's an example, all right? California now has sustainable poverty, and I like the juxtaposition of those two words, because when I tell you the story, you'll understand what I'm saying. In an article that came out of, what publication am I in? California Political News, written by Chris Street. He is talking about what he calls California sustainable poverty, and he dubs that because California last year had a $2.747 trillion economy that made it the 5th largest economy on the planet. 5th, California by itself, right? According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the state experienced a 5-year boom through 2017 with an average growth of 5.9%, which is unheard of. I mean, 5.9% growth in 5 years at a time when the economy was rocky, against the national average of 3.2, which in itself was good. Despite this spectacular financial rewards last year, residents in places like Silicon Valley were doing extraordinarily well, and America was racking in that kind of money. They had the highest poverty rate in the country. Think about that. California, who's got the 5th largest economy in the world, has the highest poverty rate of 20.4%. It's the highest of 25 major metropolitan areas. By traditional income levels, California would have to close 13.4% average rate of poverty in the United States. I would have to have a close to a 13.4 average rate, and instead it has a 20% rate. Some of it is because of cost of living, housing, healthcare, utilities, and other basics, but a lot of it is because of sustainability. So California has sustainable housing regulations and onerous building codes that impact the cost of living by, are you ready for this? This is an astonishing figure. All of our regs, all the things we do, all the Save Mother Earth stuff, adds $100,000 to the cost of the average home. $100,000. Imagine how many more people could afford a home or an apartment if we took $100,000 per unit off of the basic cost. As a result, rents of $1,300 a month are average, which is about 30% higher than the rest of the country. That's part of the sustainable cost of poverty in California. Also, last year, the governor signed SB 1, which added 12 cents a gallon to fix our potholes, and yet that money is often diverted to things like bike paths and high occupancy vehicle lanes and light rail to benefit urban neighborhoods at the cost of all other neighborhoods. Now, as a result, we pay an average of about $3.53 a gallon. I don't know where that is, but I'd go buy some, versus about $2.45 nationally. And so with 17.15 billion gallons expected to be consumed over the next 12 months, listen to that number. In California, do you want to know how much we drive? We consume, let me get this number right, 17.15 billion with a B gallons of gasoline. Wow, are we driving. We can expect to pay as a result some 18.18 billion gallons more, or about $500 for every man, woman, and child in California, even though the children can't drive. The governor followed that up by signing SB 100 that mandates that California convert 100% of its fossil fuel consumption. 100%. There's to be no fossil fuel consumption by 2045, up from the current 25% in a scant matter of a few decades, which is going to be literally impossible, the experts tell me. So PG&E warns, this is one of our monopoly utilities that handles Northern California. It's not affordable, it's not sustainable. We believe customers must be protected from unreasonable rates and bill impacts. Do you think? And with silicon capital gains now evaporating because the economy is starting to do poorly in high-tech areas, which is why you see the fluctuation as you have over the last couple of weeks in the market, they're really starting to hit the peak. We've been in an 8-year expansive mode, so sooner or later the bubble is going to pop, right? Their incomes are down 15%, especially among FANG. I've never heard this acronym before. FANG, spelled F-A-N-N-G, which stands for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. Oh my God, and I'm talking fast. I'm running out of time. So FANG, which is just a great name for them, right? I love this. Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google are experiencing a 15% downturn in their economy. So all that Silicon Valley money that the government is planning on taking in California to have all this sustainable poverty isn't working. Add to the stories from California that have to do with sustainability of poverty, our pension balloon, our big problem. There's a case pending now. Where's it pending, Jerry? It's called Cal Fire Local 2881 versus CalPERS in the California Supreme Court. So it's arguing the California rule. California rule says if we give you public employee, teacher, firefighter, nurse, doctor, whoever is in a public employee position, a pension, right? That pension under the California rule can never be reduced in any fashion or transmuted in any way. We can't touch it, we can't adjust it, we can't modify it. Once we've given it to you, it's there forever for the rest of your life. And in other states, they've been able to tweak them. They've been able to put them out of their current pension plan into 401ks. They've been able to say, well, going forward, starting this year, your pension will be at a different rate, not the rate we've been paying you up to now. Under the California rule, you can't do that. Once you made a promise to somebody, it's a promise forever and ever and ever and ever. It's like being married without the possibility of divorce. And the net result of that is our pensions are imploding because of the way we've built them, which could be a whole episode, and maybe we'll do an episode on pensions. I should bring in some people to debate this notion of what we do with our pensions because they're going to cause huge problems. Well, you add all that unsustainable pension debt to what we're doing with the cost of the economy, and California becomes a very inhospitable place for businesses, which create jobs, which allow people to live here. And then you add the fact that the cost of housing is so high because we add $100,000 per unit in environmental and other regulations. It's like, yikes, we got to give ourselves a break, right? So that becomes the double whammy. State's got lots of debt obligations, and it's got lots of regulations that are making life unsustainable and housing unaffordable. And then you add to that we're going to regulate your behavior as well. And so now we've got a land rush business. There is one business in California that for the next 2 weeks is just going to be doing amazing amounts of business, and those are ammunition stores and gun dealers. And here's the reason why. In a twist on Black Friday, the highest selling stuff in San Diego County turned out to be ammunition. Why? It's a new twist on Black Friday, says this article out of, again, California Political News, written by Nate Holmes. Who he or she, I don't know if Nate is a man or a woman, writes that people were flocking to gun stores so that they could buy ammo, more ammo than guns. And the reason is, and they expect to do $1 million of business in the ammo stores in San Diego just in December on ammunition. And the reason is because starting in January, you will now have to not only pass a background check to get a gun, and you have to do that every time you get a gun, by the way. You pass a background check once, and just because your background check means nothing, you can go back there tomorrow, buy a new gun, you got to get another background check. You will now have to do it for ammunition, so that they can find out if you're capable of buying ammunition, if you fit the bill, so to speak, of who is allowed to buy it. And then the ammunition dealer will have to keep track of what you bought in a database and say, hey, Jerry came in and bought 500 rounds of .357 this week, and next week if I buy 500 rounds of .45 or 500 rounds of 9mm, they put that in the database, and they have to send that to the Department of Justice so the Department of Justice can have a record of how much ammunition I have. So imagine if I'm an ammo buyer, how much I want the government to know how much ammunition I have. And so as a result, they're out racing around buying lots of ammunition, or as one of my friends says, they're backing the truck up, beep, 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 to the garage, which is loading up and getting as much ammunition as they can before January so they can have ammunition the government doesn't know about, because who wants the government to know about your ammunition? It's just, that's the kind of insanity of our regulations that we're doing. The net result of this, by the way, is not going to stop legal gun owners from getting ammunition. You just watch the sales spike in Arizona and Nevada, and they'll find a way to get it into California. Trust me, because that's what people will do. You just can't, you'll have a black market in this stuff. People will be selling you ammo in the alleys. Hey, want to buy some .357? Because because that's what happened during Prohibition when we stopped selling booze, right? Did people stop getting drunk? No, we invented speakeasies. So this is more governmental nonsense where we aren't talking to one another about what the real solutions are, about how we solve gun violence. It isn't to do it with these kinds of regulations. There are smarter ways to do it, but that's what we're doing. So people are just buying tons of ammo. How much ammo do people have, you might ask? I heard a credible statistic that came out of one of the people who did some research on this out of a think tank, I think RAND, that said there are about, 350 million Americans. We have something like 350 to 400 million guns, and we have something like 8 trillion rounds in private possession. And they're backing up the truck as we speak in December to buy before January. So given the time, I'm going to skip the other state story I had for you, which was about ballot harvesting, and the point of which was to talk about how the Democrats used a new rule that passed 2 years ago, and the governor signed it, that allowed people to go out and ballot harvest. That means go to people's homes, pick up their absentee ballots, come and deliver them to the polls on the day of. They were doing that in prisons. They were doing that in places where there were shut-ins. They were very clever how the Democrats used ballot harvesting, which was a new bill, in order to grab lots and lots of ballots for the election. And the net result of them doing that was that people who had won on election night, people like Mimi Welters and Dana Rohrabacher and Young Kim, who looked like they were going to hang on to congressional seats, people like Janet Wynn, who looked like she was going to hang on to her state Senate seat, and others, people like Tim Shaw, who looked like he was poised to become the supervisor in Orange County in the 4th District. All of a sudden on election night, they were winners by big percentages, and 2 weeks later they were losers because of ballot harvesting. Could the Republicans have done the same thing about ballot harvesting that the Democrats did? Yeah. Did they? No. And so the net result was the Democrats were able to swing the election. And so they now have 40 of the Senate seats are dominated 29-11 by Republicans in the state legislature, and in the assembly, of the 80 assembly seats, 60 belong to Democrats. That's what ballot harvesting does. That's how they swept 7 of the 14 Republican congresspeople out of office. Every congressperson that touches or serves Orange County, once the reddest of all counties in the United States, is now a Democrat, and thanks in large part to ballot harvesting. And so shame on you, Republicans, for letting the Democrats get a drop on you and use the new law effectively when you did not. And it's time for everybody to wake up. The point of telling you that was, and I didn't get a chance to read you the article, which is much more informative, but I will point you to it because I want you, some of you really like to read this stuff. Again, it's in California Political News, written by Stephen Frank. No, he just lit into it. Written by Christina Lalia. Ballot harvesting leads to 250,000 ballots, and you should go read it. The point of that is that any chance that we were going to change some of these sustainable regulations, the cost of housing, the manner in which we deal with our pitched political atmosphere, that would occur anytime shortly is sort of dashed by the fact that now Democrats have a supermajority in almost every legislative seat and dominate in Congress. And you can see more and more of these pitch battles coming in the next 2 years, the last 2 years of the Trump's first administration, from the national level and at the state level, especially in blue states. Wow, I'm breathless after telling you all that. All right, let's talk about a good story. So that's where we're all pitched and doing it wrong. Where are we doing it right? God bless them, Anaheim. I know it sounds like I'm biased because that's where our offices are, and I work closely with people in Anaheim and appreciate them. And I know it's our biggest city. But they did something right, and they did it by this public-private partnership, and they did it with grit and a decision to be a leader early when Anaheim decided to open an emergency homeless shelter and clear their parks of people in the winter months when the rains were coming, because of the efforts of Mayor Sadu, who was newly sworn. So he gets sworn, I believe, on December 4th on a Tuesday night, and by December 6th he's having a special meeting saying, I want to move heaven and earth, and I want to have an emergency 200-bed homeless shelter. There's an emergency for you. Maybe I'll be evacuating. Let's listen.
An emergency has been reported in the building. Please evacuate immediately using the marked stairways and exits.
Okay, well, I've never had a show truncated by that. We'll tell you more about what Mayor Sadu did with the homeless after we come back from evacuating. See you all later. Have a good week.